well, they realize that they're going to lose and badly and get this thing all declared unlawful. So in the 2023 National Defense Authorization Act from Congress, they rescinded the mandate so that, my belief, the DOJ could run to every single court where we had there were over 40 military focused lawsuits against this, and they could get them declared as moot. But then when we were able to demonstrate that it was unlawful, and we got preliminary rulings that it was unlawful, and that's when I think the government said, okay, we're in trouble. Issue an unlawful order. First unlawful order I'd ever had in the military. I could not go to church.
Commander Rob Green, welcome to the Sword&Spade
Honored
podcast. Welcome to the farm. For those that are listening or watching, we should know that our children have been herded together away. I don't know if people, this podcast is recorded on our farm, St. Joseph's Farm. And we have our own farm operations going here for our children. And then we also just had a mutual friend here who had similar stories, which we're going to talk about today. And it's especially about your book, Defending the Constitution Behind Enemy Lines, a story of hope for those who love liberty. So before that, could you tell me, we met through Fraternus. So what was your experience? That was in Huntsville.
Yeah. So I was traveling with the Navy and, and we live out of state, but I wanted to stay connected. My father, had found Fraternus, and my brothers were doing Fraternus, and they kept, singing the praises. Like, this has been so good for us, for our spiritual development, for finding a brotherhood with other men. And so, I couldn't join and do, meetings with them every week, being stationed elsewhere. But I did officially join and, paid my dues. I did that for a few years.
Just so you know, you broke the rules. You cannot.
Yes, I know. So as you'll learn in the course of this podcast, I tend to break rules, especially when they're unconstitutional or
Fraternus is unconstitutional.
No, yeah, doing the Navy side.
But you joined us at Ranch, right?
I joined at Ranch, and just an incredible experience. It was really great for me. It was great for my sons who were able to go. Got to hear you speak. And I mean, it was a great experience. And so that's where we had met the first time, and why, even when I wrote this book, we can talk about some of the story of that. When I wrote this book, I just felt called to reach out to you and say, hey, would you be willing to write an endorsement of this thing? I wanted to bring in a lot of the Catholic individuals who had helped me along the way, because it was something that helped us get through some of that hard time.
Yeah.
And so I'm really grateful for Fraternus for that.
I want to give you a little background. It was, this. So at the height of COVID, things got kind of weird. I don't know if you heard. We experienced that early on. I have not there's no sort of like public weighing in on things because there's so much. It got, like, as you mentioned in the book, it got so weird, so political, so ideological, so quickly that it became impossible. And we saw it, right through communities, just these weird, this great dividing of people that was strange. But one of the reasons it was strange for us is that we're certain, but from like testing, that actually our community way out in here where you are in North Carolina had COVID before it was cool. Somebody had traveled to New York, came back, and we were all this weird sickness, breathing thing down for a long time. And then we were over it and everyone was up. And then we started hearing about COVID on the news. And honestly, we weren't really paying attention. And maybe we were making too light of it. I remember listening. I don't know if I should tell the story. We're listening to the news and they're like, the United States leads the world in COVID. And I taught the kids whenever they heard that, to go, USA. I'm just kidding.
That's really funny.
But we were keeping it, I don't know. We were just trying to keep our heads low because actually our parish, and we just didn't shut down. We just kept having mass. And we did go in pastures and outside. And then eventually it's like, no, we're going back to church.
Yeah.
And, that was divisive. There was people that, just felt like we were being reckless. And then where I live, just north of the border of South Carolina, people were going to the store, buying toilet paper in public pretty quickly. It was like not a heavy shutdown area. We're just, right here in this, we're just interacting. And, but we were doing these events on St. Joseph's Farm, and people were coming from Canada or Baltimore. Yeah. And the stories they were telling were bizarre. And I was scared almost to say anything. Cause it was like, I don't want that it was just weird. It's just, you didn't know how people were going to respond to these things. So when you sent me this, I was thinking, I don't know if I want to like put a blurb in a book and maybe this guy is one of these weirdos, maybe he's, but
you got me. I absolutely am.
No, but then you did send me the PDF and I read through it. And I think I said in the blurb, what I said about you was, they wanted us to think they being, again, I'm even trying really hard not to sound controversial, but there was a narrative that people like you were crazy, and not serving their country by not taking the vaccine, which is what a lot of your book revolves around, right. Along with some of the other just draconian measures, but not taking the vaccine. And we were told you were crazy. And as I read through it, I was like, no, these are the kind of men that you want defending your country. I mean, it was heroic. So anyway, I'm glad to have
you played a
part of it. Well, so tell me, I think I have I was rereading some of the book last night, of course, right? You got to cram before a test or a podcast. Tell me why you named it Defending the Constitution Behind Enemy Lines.
So, I mean, I struggled for a while trying to come up with a title that conveyed, kind of our experience. But I also wanted it to be, just a little bit pokey at the people who led this thing. And so, we were, as you mentioned, we were sort of identified as, we're the rule breakers. We're the people who are, we're going to kill grandma and things like that.
Grandma killers, they were everywhere.
Yes. And so, it boils down to, is the Constitution, is it meant to be taken seriously or not? Do we have individual rights or do we not? And, for those of us who swore an oath to the Constitution, we're going to say, hey, we do, if somebody wants to stay in their home and if they want to, believe everything the government tells them and take a shot or wear a mask or just something, I absolutely, defend your right. You're welcome to do it. But when you want me to do something that violates my conscience or teach my family to live in a certain way, live in fear, we're not going to participate in that. And, you're bumping up against, this individual rights, versus the government's idea of what they think is, best for the collective. And so that's really the essence of the story. And when you have the government coming out and targeting individuals, and I'll get into, some of that story, even some of it's just a few months ago. It's still ongoing.
It's still going.
Oh, yeah. It's still going. And, when they come out and they weaponize the law and the tools that the government has against you, you truly feel like you're behind enemy lines.
Yeah.
And, you're always looking over your shoulder, always concerned about, that's a way you could live it. And so we chose not to live that way. When they threatened to, court-martial us, potentially jail us, things like that, like it was a quick conversation with my wife, Mary Claire, and she's, by the way, the bravest person in this whole story. She's absolutely sure you can go to jail. That's no problem.
Wow.
it was a really quick decision for us. But then when I made that decision, we're going to stand up for what we believe in and we're not going to participate in the fear mongering. It was freeing. I had so much joy. The fear left. And then I've got to meet so many incredible people in the course of, helping others try to stand up for their rights, and meeting people. And I've ended up doing podcasts like this, where we get to talk about some of those principles. And so
there is no podcast like this.
Yeah.
Just so you know, the reason I wanted you to come on, the Sword&Spade podcast is specifically for the Fraternus chapters, Fraternus squads, the Fraternus men. And most of them are, not all of them, but most of them are interested in how do I teach my sons to have virtue, right? And of course, I wish it wasn't this way, but you have to, as a father, have to have virtue yourself, I wish there was another way besides me being the problem. But the virtue I want to that I was tying your story to is fortitude. And you're using the word fear. And during the pandemic, a lot of people kept using the word prudence, or charity. Let's be loving. Let's be prudent. But it actually was, and this is especially your opening chapters about how you have your reasoning, but there was an intuitive, and this is what I share. There was an intuitive sense that we're responding to fear wrongly. Right. And the virtue of fortitude is the virtue you need in the face of fear. Right. Because fortitude, and you mentioned this, it helps you basically decide, do I run away from something? Do I endure something, or do I fight something? Those are kind of your options. You can either, fleeing makes sense because God made us have fear so that we avoid things that cause us harm. So sometimes you need to run away. Endurance is I can't back down. Right. So this would be the martyr. Right. Or, and very similar to your case, or I've got to fight, meaning there's something I have to actually attack here. I want to give you a reason for your title that you might have missed because it's really good. You make your at the beginning, the research on, because we're talking about a lot of things here, the fear, all this stuff, but it really comes down to the vaccine. Will I take the vaccine or not? I mean, we can all be like, hey, look, man, the lockdown's a little draconian. I'm not wearing your mask or people might feel the other way. Just stay home. What's the big deal? Just again, this is like, okay, well, we have a different sense of how to respond to this fear. And because there was so much conflicting or differing information, it was really hard to know basically who was being a jerk and who wasn't. There was times where it's like, I traveled to go on a podcast right when Delta said you have to wear a mask. And this was, I don't want to, it's not trying to be controversial. I just was like, no, I just felt like something was not right about that. And maybe it's because I was here building a house and I'm with construction workers walking on beams and it's like, they're facing danger every day. And I've already had COVID at this point. And, but I also I talked to other friends, like I felt like a jerk and that made me feel like, but I just can't, as you said, participate. So anyway, the book, as it unfolds, you have the research, but you talk about the swirling, strange atmosphere. But then you describe what the military and what the DoD was doing was essentially, this is like, I underlined, I was trying to find it, I can't find it here, where you said they turned their sights on the enemy, which is our enemies, our adversaries, and they turned, inward heavily.
Yes.
So that you actually became the enemy. Yeah. So you're behind enemy lines. All of a sudden, the attacks you're enduring and then the fight you have to now take was really fascinating. That was the big shift. So, yeah, tell me about when you sort of realized this isn't a matter of protocol, but like I am being targeted. Like when did that start escalating?
Yeah, and it's important probably for the audience to understand, too, that you have to have proper authority as well to make some of these decisions. And so this is not just me having a gut feeling that this is wrong, and then I marched and charged the hill, right? They actually broke the law in two very clear ways. And once that was clear to us, that's when we said, okay, now we get what's happening.
Who's us, real quick?
So there's a large network of people in Department of Defense and now federal contractors. I've got contacts, former DOJ, FBI people. A lot of us have found each other in the course of fighting lawlessness within our government. So it's started off as a very small network, but it's grown very, very large.
Right. So that is the conservative impulse, not just right-left conservatism, but I mean that the rule of law matters. And
yes.
That was what, once you realized that was like, I guess that's what flipped the switch on like, this is not okay.
Right. So, and I'll lay those out really quickly so it makes sense for the audience who's maybe never heard this before. But so the two things are under Title 21, you always have a right to informed consent. And when a product is an emergency product, you always have the option to refuse that, even service members.
Okay.
If something's coming into your body, you always have the option to refuse it. And then the other thing is for religious accommodations under the law, both Title 10 and I believe this is Title 42, 21 or 42. But under the law, when you declare your faith, you are exercising your First Amendment rights. The government cannot trample those. They have, statutorily, they have created for themselves a couple steps that you have to take. The government has to demonstrate that it outweighs your religious beliefs, their government need. And then they have to demonstrate that they can't accommodate you in any lower way. It has to be what they say, the way that they say. Okay. And so when we filed complaints internally, so, you take things like the Bible says, you go to your brother first. That doesn't work. You pull in the authority. So we did this internally first. We filed these complaints up our chain of command and said, look, you're breaking the law in these two key ways. And what we got instead was our leaders, the admirals, the generals, the civilian leadership, circled the wagons and basically said, this is the agenda. Everything's good.
And they dug in.
And they dug in. They dismissed the complaints. And
I saw there was one. Hold on. There was one guy though. We have a mutual friend. He was just here at the farm. Who's and throughout this conversation, I know that I'm not going to just use any names because I'm not sure which ones are out or which ones aren't. But he had his superior officer interpreted it liberally, in the true sense of the word, meaning, hey, it says you may do these things, but I'm not going to punish you. Keep your men in your command, ready. And that was and apparently he said his men were actually some of the most compliant in a good way. They had the freedom to comply, whereas other ones were not. So there were some, and he was explaining to me the different parts of the Navy and how their responses, some of them were just different.
Uniquely for the military justice system sort of rests all of authority on the commanding officers. Okay. So commanders at every level have the ability to interpret, to enforce. They have JAG lawyers. These are the military lawyers who advise them, but ultimately it's the commanders themselves. And so that's why we ended up with these differences of enforcement.
Okay, that was confusing to me. So there were entire groups of the Navy that might have been treated and responding differently.
Yeah, absolutely. But that only happened in the first few weeks, maybe a couple months.
Okay.
But then what happened was the highest level authorities in the government started going after those commanders.
Okay.
And firing commanders who weren't enforcing the rules in the most draconian way that the administration and the highest level Pentagon leaders wanted. And so when we filed our complaints, to your point about them not punishing our mutual friend, when we started filing our complaints, they would dismiss the complaints, and then across the entire Pentagon, they decided to come up with policy that they were going to start, firing us from the military. They threatened court-martial proceedings. We became the enemy after demonstrating that they were breaking the law. So I'm going to pull this back. You mentioned fortitude. I'm going to pull this back for a second. Like any virtue, it has to be exercised. Right. And so what we have found is that the people who are exercising these, moral courage or, temperance, prudence, when they're exercising these in their daily lives, they're strengthened for the big fight when it comes. Right. It's like any training. And so we have kind of lost that in the military in a way. Like we'll train physically, but we're not training our people in these moral, virtues and these imperatives that we have to face things like this. And so one of the things that really struck me in going through this is that our leaders had disordered principles. You talked about prudence and people, so they would elevate prudence above, some of these other principles, some of the other values. And so in the course of them exercising a disorder of virtue, it's how we ended up disordering our priorities as a nation. It's why Secretary Lloyd Austin said, "Hey, COVID is our number one priority."
Yeah,
so, then China was after that. It was nuts.
I actually underlined and starred this in the book. Historically, this is your words: national security and defense of our nation had always been the Navy's number one concern.
Right.
Right. So I assume that the very first statement on the order I received, your health and safety are the Navy's number one concern, was a false official statement. So I have to tell you, that wasn't a red flag for you.
Oh, yeah.
My biggest red flag, and I mean this sincerely, where I was concerned that this issue of leadership and authority and principles really matters, because my biggest beef, again, like you said, it's not just, there was an intuitive, hey, something's going on here, and I want to like rebel, right? You're bringing up, well, there's also the legal implications, right? My biggest problem, though, is that my children, we were obviously living in a place where people were doing the theatrics of compliance without belief. So we would be somewhere and they would see these people on display. And then behind the scenes, they would be, taking their masks off and talking, and like, so they on stage, they're one way, and children perceive those things. So for them, that's going to teach them authority is arbitrary and theatrical. It's not legitimate and a true hierarchy.
Right.
And that's really troubling. I remember, again, the Delta flights where they changed the video you watch beforehand, where people that had already been on a pre-recorded thing, they computer imposed fake masks on the video so that the people talk. Yes, they did.
Why? Wow.
And then when it was over, because they didn't re-record videos of people wearing masks, which, by the way, is cruel, because, some people need to see lips to be able to, but but they had, with the computer, it's like, that was unnecessary. I'm not catching the virus from the video. This is but the theatrics got so intense, they had to do that. As if the whole world is going to do this forever, therefore let's put the masks on. And then when COVID was over, they took the mask off the same recording. But sorry, back to what you said. This was a red flag for you, your health and safety are the Navy's number one concern. There was a diocese, not mine, but I live in an area where there's multiple, where
you have a little freedom.
Yeah. There's a border near me, and the website for the diocese said, your health and safety is our number one concern. And I was horrified, and I'm not trying to exaggerate. I was horrified, because if I get sick and die from this, that's bad. But if I die and go to hell, that's worse. I really would like you, since you've been charged with, dispensing the mysteries of God and preaching the gospel and the salvation of souls, I would really like you to leave that concern to institutions for whom that's the reason they exist. That's not why you exist.
Yes.
And that was, I know that seems, I don't know, to some people it might seem, but it was alarming that someone didn't think about their words, that it was posted up, that your number one concern is my health. No, I want your concern to be my safety. Just like, and I underline that because when I'm thinking about the military, I want their number one concern to be, defending the country.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
I mean, so anyway, that was a big red flag for you.
Oh yeah.
So you're sending up, to your story, you're sending up these legal challenges. You're saying, hey, you're breaking the law. The response then is that weird, and it was weird, the digging in and circling of the wagons within a certain echelon of authority. And then you became the enemy. And then did they just ignore the legality of what was going on and just keep attacking? Or like, how did it go once they just decided we don't care about protocol law?
Yeah. So once I realized that was happening, and I want to go back to your story too for a second, by the way, real quick, then I'll answer the question. But I think, again, that's an example of disordered principles.
Yeah.
Like, these aren't bad things to want to keep people healthy. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
But if you're the church and your charge is to go and win souls, maybe the health of those souls, or the physical bodies of that the souls are in, maybe that's not the number one priority. I'm reminded of a saint who, Middle Ages time frame, climbing piles of bodies during bubonic plague to try to find people still alive, to go and, offer confession, to go try to save their souls. Mm-hmm. And where is that level of
that was the
properly ordered principles and courage?
The Catholic witness, especially, I have a fascination with the American South and the history of Catholicism here. And a lot of times there was anti-Catholicism was rampant, and all we needed was a good plague, yellow fever or something, because then everyone liked the Catholics, because the clergy and the religious and even the laity would be there long after the Protestant clergy had fled. And that's, I mean, honestly, in South Carolina and Louisiana, that's where we got big boosts in public image, was that we're ready to, our health is not and your health is not our number one concern, actually. And because of that, we're not going anywhere. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love it.
Yeah,
so to answer your question on what we did next. So, it became for me, they trained me, they sent me to, Joint Forces Staff College. I've understand, operational and strategic level of war. They created this, and I just happened to try and keep my principles properly ordered. So when I realized that, hey, they're breaking the law, and when we tell them about it, they are ignoring us and now coming after our people. I'm seeing other commanders in the Navy who are in leadership positions who are trying to push back. They're getting fired, left and right. I'm in comms and in communications with some of them, and I realized, hey, let's put these skills that they gave us to use. I took an oath to support and defend, use the words of the oath, support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. This looks to me an awful lot like a domestic enemy to the Constitution if they're violating individual constitutional rights and doing so in a lawless manner. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I decided, hey, how do you fix the enemy into a position? Well, you go on offense. So,
all right. So we're talking about fortitude. All right. You had some endurance. You had to decide if you're going to run away. You said no. You had to endure a little bit, and then you went on the offensive.
Yeah. Well, we'd already had the conversation, Mary Claire and I. And so, I'm willing to go to prison already to stand up on my individual rights. Well, if I just stay and stick to myself, I'm not really helping anyone else. Mm-hmm. I have hundreds of people who
you
work
probably
for
just
me.
Get fired and dismissed.
Oh, I'm going to get fired anyway. I know I am. As a matter of fact, they sent a message out in, late 2021. And, hey, the full force of the UCMJ is going to be used, if you don't comply by this date. And I'm like, I've already told them I'm not going to do it. I already filed a religious accommodation. I'd become a liar if I go back on that. And,
right.
And so it's easy at that point to be like, okay, who are the admirals who should have been willing to put their stars on the table to defend individual rights as soon as the people underneath them had said, here's my religious belief? Well, those are the people who are the problem of my chain of command. Those are the people I'm going to go after them. Mm-hmm. And so I started filing complaints on those people.
Just to be clear, no one put their stars on the table.
No, not a single admiral or general was willing to stand up to the mandate. Not one.
What was the highest level of authority you saw fighting back?
It was mainly 05. So that's lieutenant colonels and the other services, commanders in the Navy. There were a few 06s, a few captains. The friend that we alluded to earlier, he was an 06. One of the most courageous. As a matter of fact, I'll share this other story, which we haven't talked about before. But when he filed a religious accommodation to not personally take it, now he was also at the same time defending all the people underneath him. He was, they were basically ordered to deny all the religious accommodations. Mm-hmm. It actually came out in a court case. The Air Force, the Secretary of the Air Force himself had said there will be no approvals of religious accommodations. It's filed in court, and there's going to be accountability for that if we can see this thing to fruition. But in this particular case, this Navy 06, friend of ours, both of ours, when he filed his own personal one, after they had already been ticked off that he was approving religious accommodations for his people against their secret, it's the underground guidance, the secret guidance.
Yeah.
They wouldn't put it in writing that you're not allowed to recommend. So he doesn't have the authority to approve them, but to recommend approval. It was actually a 3-star admiral, told a confidant, and this story got back to me that, oh yeah, this particular captain is, just happened to find God because he doesn't want to go along with this.
Right. So he didn't believe him. Right?
Yeah, they didn't believe him.
Which actually, so this mutual friend I know, he's a bit of a health nut in a good way. Like he cares about what goes in his body. Yeah. It has to do with, wanting to have children and having a hard time having children. And so as I was talking to him, he was first, like in your book, I'm a little bit nervous about this experimental rushed through drug. That's not even talking about the use of aborted fetal tissue to develop the drug. And then so those were pretty decent reasons right there. And then for someone, you're saying they just cynically said, you guys were just using your faith. Like you were using God for your own ends. But what exactly would those ends be? What, I mean, if it wasn't a religious exemption and you were pursuing it, why, like, what did they think you were after? Because I'm guessing he's not that he is not a religious man. If he thinks someone is just using their religion but like, they're not going to like get ahead. What was his, why would you do that?
Well, I can't speak for what's in somebody else's heart and mind, but what I can share is that for a long time, maybe a couple decades, our most senior admirals and generals have risen through the ranks by putting their careers first.
Okay.
They never say no. They volunteer for almost everything. If somebody says, "Hey, I need a 3-ship presence in the Mediterranean for ballistic missile defense," well, they're not going to stand up to the institution. They're going to find a way to do it. I mean, it doesn't matter that, we've got sailors that just returned. Like, I'm sorry, they're going back out. So we have done this for decades, and that's within their purview. They're not doing anything unlawful.
Put some flesh on that little example you just gave. So you're telling me that they would be willing to harm soldiers to make a show of ships for their career? Is that what you mean by that? Oh,
yeah, absolutely. So let me share some data for you to back that up. So It's not just me, firing randomly into. So
that's not your training. That's not.
Yeah, no. We find, fix, finish. Targeted against the enemy, right? So during COVID, we had, by the time they mandated the shot, I think there were only about 30 deaths attributed, allegedly, to the virus itself from service members. Up to that same point, we had over 1,000 suicides during that time frame. In the course of the 3 years that the mandate was in place for the military, there were a total of 96 deaths, again, allegedly due to the virus itself. In that same period of time, there's 1,561 deaths from suicide. These kids were, I say kids, but, these men and women, they were locked down. They were verbally abused. They had benefits taken from them. They were denied leave to go do things. There were all kinds of levels of coercion that would boggle your mind. And we can get into some of the details, and I'll tell a couple of stories.
These are specifically, these are suicides tied, this is not general population or even within the military itself. We're talking about largely and obviously because of the abuse, the strange situation. This was an abnormal rise of suicides because of what was going on.
I think any of them are abnormal. Now, can we sit there and say, hey, these are exclusively due to these lockdowns and stuff? No way. We can't make that correlation.
Right.
But
it didn't help.
Yeah, it didn't help. I mean, these are people probably also struggling, mentally or in their spiritual life. Maybe they've never been taught the right way. They didn't have, somebody telling them, Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. Mm-hmm. You can find what you're looking for in him. And so if they don't have that, and you're putting the full force of the government, power and dictating all of these, what we would, at least I would call draconian measures on individuals. Yeah, you're going to increase the likelihood that people are going to struggle.
And so what was among the military? So, and you had a specific story. I want to make sure you get to that about how, these individuals were harmed. You're saying specifically by the admirals, and you're using this analogously in their career, that they're always willing, or they have been relatively willing to dismiss the harm they might do
to go along with the narrative,
to go along with everything.
Yeah.
What was it like though? I know, my local little tiny parish, pretty significant divides. People completely rolling their eyes at vaccine, talk or what was it like? And I know this is really hard to, again, you don't know what's in people's minds and hearts, but in general, the mood of things can be known. The military is different from the general population because they're under command, right? Constantly, always, right?
Yes. Yeah, we're subject to the UCMJ, the Uniform Code of Military Justice.
Okay. So you have this code. This is what you're doing. So you're following orders. Obviously, you're saying some of these orders are illegitimate, therefore I have to do something different. But broadly speaking, they're following orders.
Yes.
Different from the general population, which was following strange non-laws, right? What was the mood? I mean, just was there skepticism, or was there compliance largely, or was there a moment where this shifted, or different branches have different ethos, or was it, I mean, or was it as scattered and chaotic and difficult to know as the United States? Because again, I'm right here near South Carolina. People there were acting very different from Baltimore, and we would have people from Baltimore visiting, and it's like worlds apart on how they were responding to what was going on. So that's a pretty broad question, but what was it similar to the general population, or was it different because of the chain of command?
I think that the general sentiment was very similar because everybody's individual, right? Everybody, like some people had parents or grandparents with comorbidities and things where they're at higher risk.
Right.
And, to our earlier discussion, these are not bad principles if they're properly ordered. And so for those individuals, yes, absolutely, do the extra measures because it fits your individual situation, and all of us are going to support you. And so everybody is going to come to this particular issue, and any issue really, from a different perspective with an individual path that's best for them. And so what we saw happen, though, was in the military first, the government tried to dictate a one-size-fits-all solution to a problem. And as the military goes, so goes the rest of the nation. And so what we saw, the sentiment was I say a majority of people were doubtful. They were curious about, throwing out the old ways of approving, vaccines. I mean, it was a 12-year process normally.
Yeah. And
they allegedly did it in 9 months. Okay, let's talk about that. Oh, by the way, that law that I mentioned before, the Title 21 law, well, that requires it requires a certain criteria to be met for the FDA to even approve something, and that's for liability purposes.
Right.
When you approve for an emergency use a product, all liability is on the individual receiving the product because they're the only ones who have the authority to say yes or no, put it in my body. Everyone else is indemnified. You can't sue the government. You can't sue Congress. You can't sue the manufacturers of the drug. You can't sue the person putting it in your body if it's an emergency use product. And so that they wanted to see with the emergency use product, because they never produce an actual fully licensed product, by the way, through the course of we have people trying. So they labeled some eventually in 2022, I believe, May of 2022. And I write about it in the book, so the details are there. But we think they falsely labeled it because Pfizer, declared back in September of 2021, shortly after the military mandate came out, like, we're not going to produce any of the fully licensed product because we have billions of the emergency product on the shelves. And it was just a money decision for them. And oh, by the way, the liability protections continue with the emergency product. So that's the environment that we were in. And in the military, I'm of the opinion that they were trying to see essentially what they could get away with, what they could direct.
Yeah. It seemed like there was a strange drunkenness on a new form of power and a new exercise of control. And I know that and again, I appreciate your almost defense of everybody here, that like there was people that were just receiving this, what was going on differently. But a lot of times we were told, of course, if you had a question about this, you're just questioning science, right? The whole Fauci thing was that. And it made basically like, you're dumb. And there are intelligent people that somehow are now in charge. Even, not in the normal chain of command, but not in the normal hierarchy of authority that we understand in our country, because this is a unique time.
Right.
And it's true. Of course, there's moments like, okay, well, there's, when, if all the septic tanks in the city are overflowing, right? You want to hear from the plumbers on what maybe we should be doing. Like, I understand we needed that, but because the just amount of stories and data that was available made things confusing. And there was just, there were scientists out there that were questioning everything. I actually attended I can't use any names because this is the weird time it was. A man he's connected through Fraternus, and he led a sort of secret webinar because he worked for a vaccine development company, and he just wanted to explain what was going on. And he was a vaccine guy. He's not anti-vax. He makes vaccines. That's what he does. And he had to have this secret meeting to sort of like give us, because we all just wanted to know what was going on. And he explained it, and it didn't make it less alarming. I'll put it that way. But then the reason I became more angry, and you're bringing this up, you're rousing these, it was that our sense data, things we could see with our own eyes, we were not allowed to like think those things through. For example, I watched the news, and it was reporting on a hospital near me that was overrun. The beds were full. They're running out of, this was still like, we're going to run out of ventilators time. But then ventilators weren't cool anymore later. And I knew somebody who worked at the hospital, and I went up to her after mass. And I said, man, I saw on the news how you guys are just, and she said, nope, we're fine. It's not overrun. We're fine. What am I supposed to do? That's sense data. That is me. I'm hearing a report on one thing through a channel that I'm supposed to be receiving what's true and what's I can like some reputable. And then the data right in front of me is not matching up to it. You know, that was difficult to reconcile, but we were not allowed in some ways to question that. And then people just started putting that together. And there was an explosion of a sort of power drunkenness, there was an explosion of things that probably went haywire in lots of ways, of like the conspiracy theories and trying to put all these little pieces together. I don't think it was, I mean, just my opinion, some mass coordinated, practice run of draconian. I mean, it seems plausible that someone could think that. I really just think things got escalated and got out of hand, and people with power liked it and kept using it. Mm-hmm. And then where we are now, and this is what I'd like to ask you about what you're doing now, is we're all now supposed to pretend it didn't happen. And I want to be able to go back to friends and say, remember when you said like, well, just listen to the bishops, and I don't think that was right. Listen to your bishops when it's right, but I want to be able to revisit these things. We have family that are, very different politically. And I want to be able to go back and say, remember when you said we were anti-science, but then now that thing that we said is true. What do we do with that now? And there is no returning. Right. No one is returning to talk about it. I don't know if later they'll do some documentaries or something, but I don't know of anyone outside of alternative media or something who's like returning to these issues and asking the big questions. But you're telling me to get to where you are now, your story was, and fill in the gaps, anything I'm missing, but you said, this is strange, but I'm following orders. Then the orders appeared illegal. Yep. So I'm not going to follow the orders. You started finding other people that were in similar spots. I mean, you were telling about somebody who worked for the FBI who's still on unpaid leave and cannot get a job because of his contract. So they've got him
949 days. His name's Garrett O'Boyle. Great guy.
Okay. So there's a man with over 900 unpaid days being forced by the government to not work, to not get paid and not be able to work as a free man in his country. I mean, that almost sounds like some form of slavery or something, or
it's wild.
Indentured servant to the government or something. Anyway, it's a new category of, I've never even heard of that. So you picked up, this was illegal. You started fighting back. They circled the wagons, and you were just dismissed. Yeah.
So I was fired from my position in early 2022.
And, I meant dismissed, like your concerns were
the concerns were dismissed, and then I was physically dismissed.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. And then it was about 7 months of exile, and then we started winning in court.
Okay. Wait. What was going on before you get to what was going on in the exile? You guys were just, is that when you started networking?
Oh, I was building out networks. I was continuing to write. I was continuing to learn.
Did the 7 months give us this book?
The 7 months played a large part in the production of this book. And we started winning in court, and it was evidence that I released to one of the federal courts, demonstrating that the Navy, not only broke the law, but they had a standard operating procedure that they wrote up to deny religious accommodations. And in court, I mean, the judge had that for about 5 business, working days. And then, that's when they started issuing the injunctions.
So their SOP was patently and obviously.
Yes. You take the name of the requester and you put it in the denial template, and then you route the denial template for review.
Okay.
And then you open up the request to document what's in it.
This goes back to my point that I was saying with my children. It was the abuse and misuse and confusion of authority.
Yes.
That was the most trouble. I don't want them to think this is what authority means.
Yeah. So that was what it was for our kids too. So, my wife never put a mask on. Our kids never saw me in one. But even I, to my shame, I compromised a little bit because I participated in the lie for a brief period of time with the masking.
Yeah.
Even though I didn't believe it, I knew it was wrong and it didn't make sense. And you've heard the mosquito through a chain link fence thing and all that, right? So, so none of us are perfect in this, but that's why I think that we're having accountability issues now. Why no one wants to talk about it, because some people are much more complicit in much higher levels. And the people who were draconian believing, maybe some of them in good faith, trusting their government, trusting what people are telling them around them. And they have this disordered principle, this prudence element that's above charity or above liberty. And
you were saying, I mean, really, and I would agree with this. This is in all types of society, the church too, that there comes like a certain level of like careerism where they actually stop thinking. I believe, and I'm not trying to sound mean here. They stop thinking in the form of principles and what's right. And they literally just have the paradigm of, like, I think this happens in the church when what is said publicly is seen between the paradigm of lawyers and the media, right? When it comes to maybe handling a scandal, and not souls and your children, right? So it's like you stop being a father and you start being just a careerist. I don't know again, this is that drunk on power, the authority. It was only in the mode of the career. So at this point, that seems like they're probably still in. I'm not going to revisit this because why would I? It's either embarrassing or illegal. That's probably not a good look. So
yeah, and we're in a tough spot too because it is going to be very hard. What if you were one of those people and you're full of love, right? And you're one of those people that wants to let illegals in the country because you just want to give, and and that's your ideology is love to the point of you're harming yourself, right? And so again, it's a disordered set of value systems. But if you're one of those people and you, out of love, got your children vaccinated and your children got harmed in some way, how can you look at yourself in the mirror? How could you possibly believe what you were told was a lie and a conspiracy theory 4 years ago? And when you go to visit your child's grave, there's children who have died as a result of this shot.
And it makes you think. I was just visiting
how
somewhere.
can these people face it?
And I was just visiting somewhere, and it again, I don't know the date on this, but there's these, this community was in mourning because a kid died. And like, from what? And they're like, he was out. He's an athlete. And he just died. Like I
mean, it's sad. It's
very sad.
Horrific. And if you're the parent, and it's one thing to bury a child, it's something completely different to know that you unknowingly, caused their death.
Right. But at least in that case, you were trying to love. We were told this is the right thing. And again, this is why this is such a hairy issue, is that the sincerity and the genuine love of a lot of people that were compliant with everything was from a motivation of love, of like, I remember a guy
disordered, love.
There was a doctor of mine, and he explained the whole flatten the curve thing. Like, remember when that was cool?
Oh,
for a little while,
for 2 years to stop the spread,
2 weeks or a decade, something. And he was explaining, no, this is how that works. And then later he came back and he was like, that was totally wrong, But in the moment, he was just trying to literally do what was right. So it becomes very complicated. But that's a matter of, at least in that case, you're going to have regrets. I guess we're talking about the people that were breaking the law. So in authority, abuse of authority.
Yes.
And that's actually more fearful for us because we're all aware, you're a dad, I'm a dad. We know we make mistakes. But when it comes to people abusing us with power, that was more troubling. And I guess I'm excited. I honestly haven't, I've even dismissed. I like, you stop, like, remember that weird time? I've stopped thinking about it, but talking to you now, it's like there should be some accountability. So there needs to be, for the sake of, I mean, obviously the correcting in the future, but that was very troubling how fast we were able to sort of be brought under a strange control. And for ends defended by, scientism, which is belief that that's the only thing we can think through with science. There's other things we can think through.
Right.
But you started winning in court. So I guess we would say, thank God for the courts. Is that where things started to turn?
Well,
because the higher ups weren't changing.
Oh no.
So is the only way to do anything right now then is through the courts and maybe a little public shaming?
Well, so the courts were useful in that, because the law was so clear, black and white, clear as crystal, and we had the evidence. We got the injunctions. That means that the military wasn't able to continue kicking us out.
Okay.
But it's a bit of a long story, and I'll shorten it to basically, where they realize that they're going to lose, and badly, and get this thing all declared unlawful back in 2022. So in the 2023 National Defense Authorization Act from Congress, they rescinded the mandate so that, my belief, the DOJ could run to every single court where we had there were over 40 military focused lawsuits against this. And they could get them declared as moot, thrown out.
Because it's rescinded. Hey, our bad. It's rescinded.
It's rescinded. It's no longer a case. And the judges went along with this.
Okay.
In almost
makes accountability go away.
Yeah. So then we can't get this thing declared, lawful or unlawful, which is what you need. In the manual for court martial in the military, a law or an order is presumed lawful unless it violates the constitutional or statutory rights of the recipient. And so an individual takes the risk on themselves if they say, hey, I'm not going to take this. So we took the risk. We're willing to take the risk. But then when we were able to demonstrate that it was unlawful, and we got preliminary rulings that it was unlawful, and that's when I think the government said, okay, we're in trouble.
Right.
We have
that's
to
what I
get
mean.
this thing thrown out.
When people think, this was a huge coordinated thing, I'm like, I don't know. It seems like they were just, drunk on power, flying by the seat of their pants.
Yeah.
I mean, that seems like.
I actually, I agree with you on that. I don't believe there's some card carrying group of people out there that, I mean, maybe at the up billionaire level, maybe they have something going on, but
I think you have to be a trillionaire now.
Yeah. But if we're talking, I mean, I've talked a little bit about the deep state and other things I've said and done, but, there's the deep state's not made up of like some card carrying group of people. It's just guys like you and I who maybe made some other decisions in life, who have different priorities. They have different belief systems, but a lot of it boils down to disorder in either their loyalties, they're loyal to themselves or their own family above others' constitutional rights, things like that, their principles,
right,
or their priorities.
Right.
And so it's those three things. If they're disordered in that way, then they find themselves doing something selfishly or wrongly or wrong ideology that enabled all of this across the board. And so the people coordinating this, it's the demonic, frankly. They were the ones trying to egg on somebody's confusion in an area or disorder in an area to try to make it go along with this grander narrative. They never sleep. All they do is plan, and they hate us to death. So if you want to say it's coordinated on some level, at the demonic level, this was all coordinated, but not, I don't believe so at the human level. So I agree with you on that.
And this matters. I mean, you and I both have kids. They were out running around. Actually, they're making ice cream, butter, and planting corn. Yeah. You asked to do work on the farm. It's not always that cliche wonderful, but today it is. It's like 72 degrees out there or something.
It's awesome. It's beautiful. I love your farm. By the way,
what are we doing in the studio?
It's so great to get here and see it.
But we have children. Are your kids homeschooled?
Yes.
Oh, see, I knew you guys were crazy. Yeah. Ours are too. And obviously we're forming our children towards something. Ultimately, I know that that's heaven, but I would say that one of the things my wife and I have really looked at as we talk about, issues around college and career, like why you do things, it does seem that we no longer form people towards principles, solid philosophical thinking, reasoning. There is a logic of managerialism, of careerism, where there is just a movement up into power. And this is, Ian McGilchrist, an author I really like. It might be a little esoteric, but he talks about like working, like the brain itself has these powers in it and ways of thinking. And one of the things we do is we dissect things, right? And it's for analysis, this might be kind of a reasoning science. And then we put them back together in wholeness, which is what we call wisdom. And he says, we're drunk now on power, that we want power over wisdom. And that when you're sitting here going, well, these guys lost their principles, I almost think they don't care. It is a matter of power, whether I have it or not. And I don't mean literally just I like controlling people. I just think I feel powerful when I'm in control of these things. So it's very much in that case, a demonic form of power, which is not a receptive, wise, wisdom is in the pursuit and enjoyment of what's good. Power is power. And sometimes wisdom needs to use power, but power without wisdom is, I think, what we're discussing now.
Yeah. It's almost an Anakin Skywalker type thing. If I have all the power, then I can make everything good.
That's right. Then I will. Yeah. And I think I don't think they have. I don't want to say they don't have principles. That sounds so accusatory, but I don't mean that they're completely amoral. I just think actually we have formed people towards this mode of thinking, and that.
Yeah. That's why I like to say disordered in their principles, because they have principles.
Yeah.
They're just maybe out of order.
Out of order, right? Different things are first. So you're going after them. You're having some wins. They're mopping up the mess a little bit so that they don't get in trouble and lose power.
Yeah, it's accountability avoidance operation,
right. Which I think is that's a good way to put it. Which I think is another sign that this thing was just escalating in weird ways. And then the card carrying crew outside of the demonic. Which they don't get cards, by the way, I'm pretty sure. I saw that on YouTube.
Nice.
That was a little dig at YouTube. I'm sorry, that was mean. Somebody's watching this on YouTube right now. Anyway, they're cleaning up the mess. And then what are you guys doing then? Are you still in that stage where you're trying to go back and not let them get away with just rescinding everything?
So
are you still fired?
Well, I'll finish the story. So after 7 months, they didn't know what to do with me. I had filed complaints, individually against, 3 and 4 star admirals. I had gone public. I've talked about that. I name names in the book. Some of them are still active. Mm-hmm. Admiral Grady was then commander of fleet forces. I talked about it in the book, was the first one to issue an unlawful order. First unlawful order I'd ever had in the military. I could not go to church.
Right. Oh, that part in the book is great.
It's like, are you kidding? That's like the one thing, First Amendment right. Yeah. And so, and he's now the vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He was under General Mark Milley. Still there. He's still the vice chairman. And so, so for us, when we had these lawsuits thrown out, it's like, well, what else can we do? And so I came up with this idea in 2023 that we can't rely on the courts to do it. They're gonna go, with whatever's easiest. Congress is maybe, partially complicit in all of this. The executive branch, you never know where it's going to go. And it was currently under a different administration who had started the mandates in the first place. And so I said, hey, we're going to have to do it ourselves. We're going to have to hold accountability ourselves. So I came up with an idea for us to declare to a group of us in the military to hold our own admirals and generals accountable. And we came up with this idea that we would do so through working over there. We had a long-term time. We still have a long-term time horizon, 30 years, 60 years, whatever their life expectancy is. For those that, we have evidence that we told you were breaking the law. That's why I mentioned, I'll take a step back. It's why I mentioned earlier about having empathy and sympathy for these people who've made tough decisions and are struggling to face themselves and to face the truth. Because this isn't for everybody, this accountability. This is for the people at the very top who were told this is wrong, this is unlawful, and this violates the Constitution. Those are the people that accountability should be reserved for in this situation, because there was so much confusion,
right,
and so many problems. In the military, that's some of our highest ranking admirals and generals. So I wrote, and we issued it on January 1st, 2024, a Declaration of Military Accountability. 231 of us signed it. And I modeled it after the Declaration of Independence as best I could. But it was our pledge to ourselves and before God that we are going to do everything in our power to hold them accountable. And so two main ways, if we were to ever achieve, positions in the executive branch that had the authority, we would, we'd recall them for court martials. And then, because you can do that, a retired officer can be recalled to active duty and you can court martial them. The other thing is if we ever achieve legislative positions, we ever run for Congress, we're going to stop their retirement pay. Mm-hmm. So between those two things, we're going to ensure that there's some accountability. Because if you don't have some accountability for things that have happened, this kind of thing can happen again.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. What do you say to people who say, come on, man, it was confusing. Everyone did their best. Why are you digging up bones?
Yeah, so we're not going after everybody. But if we can prove I've filed this complaint against you, Admiral Grady, then that admiral, we have evidence that you should have known about this.
Therefore, you are unfit for what you're doing right now.
That's
right.
That's the path.
Yeah. Because, I mean, I guess if certain guys are out of the way, would better guys be able to fill their shoes? Would things be able to change in that way? Is that the tactic?
So those are strategic things that are in God's hands. You're
doing your part.
I'm doing my part. I just know that they broke the law. Mm-hmm. And so in so doing, they violated the Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land. Mm-hmm. And
okay. So I'm sorry. I'm trying to piece together. I'm sure this is my fault. Where are you now?
So I'm still active duty. That's where this thing gets really wild.
You told me, yes. I'm like, okay. I thought, I'm pretty sure this would get somebody fired, but okay. So you're active duty. So they didn't know what to do with you. You were exiled for 7 months. You worked on the book. You got this network going. You started talking to people, and there's a lot of them. You mentioned the guy who's now been the indentured servant for 900 days. That's what we should just call him, some sort of new.
Yeah, something crazy. And it's across all military branches. It's across, government institutions, the intelligence community. We've got people all over the place who truly are constitutionalists. Mm-hmm. And they have their principles for the most part, properly ordered, not out of order.
In this network, all right, of these people with ordered principles and a little tenacity to hold people accountable and make things public. That's kind of what you're doing now. So, but why was it 7 months? What happened at the end of the 7 months of exile?
So, they realized that I'm sitting at home doing nothing. I guess
paid,
but networking, still getting paid. So I was very blessed. They didn't, Garrett O'Boyle me.
Yeah.
And so I was able to continue getting a paycheck. Although I have another friend in the Air Force who, refused. Now he refused the COVID shot, but he said, hey, after research, I can't take any of these products. They don't actually help me. And I have, a right or a right and a duty before God to make sure everything going in my body is actually doing good things. And so I'm not taking any of these shots. Well, they not only fired him, but they cut off his pay. Mm. And so we're working on to try to get that all restored. There are some good people coming into the Department of Defense, who are, I think they're going to do really good things. So I think it's slowly turning around. But I hope in both these cases we can fix that. But for me, what they realized, hey, we need to put him back to work. He's not doing anything. So they put me back to work. I'm at Fleet Forces Command now. And but the thing is, because I took an oath, I'm not going to let this go.
Right.
And
so you still have your job, but your side hustle is exposing the people that wanted to fire you from your job or made you an enemy at your job.
Yeah. And I don't, it's not a retributional thing. I don't care about that.
Sound like it. No, if it was retribution, you would get a Twitter handle and make fun of people.
Right? I do have the Twitter handle, but okay. I'm not making fun of people, but I'm exposing.
I'm not picking out, it's at this point, some of it was so embarrassing. We could just make fun of people and probably make a job out of it. That's not what you're doing. You're obviously, I think, having, and I appreciate, I mean, I know that, for us in the church, when we see things that have gone wrong, it's extremely difficult to find actual, accountability with those, obviously completely different.
Yeah. I'll take my story real quick. Sorry. I'll take my story real quick to the conclusion, and then we can, we can talk about a few others if you want, but essentially I haven't let it go. I've continued to call them out. I've used the Twitter handle that I don't have any other social media, and I really hate social media and I want to be off it. But
it's the tool you have to use.
Yes, it is. And so they actually did a prosecutorial review on me 2 months ago.
Okay.
So they also like, hey, well, he can't be saying, why aren't we firing this admiral? He can't be saying the word lawlessness about us.
Unless it's lawless, right? Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm not going to let this go. We're going to address this thing. And so they did a whole review to see if they could, get me on court martial, to see, what can we do about this?
How can we get rid of this?
Yeah. And I think they haven't tried to go, they haven't elected to pursue a court martial on me yet. I presume because they don't want to have a discussion of the merits of what I'm going to bring up at that court martial.
Right.
And so we're in a wild game of chicken right now, because I'm not going to let what they did unlawfully during the course of the COVID mandate go. And so we're, either they're going to have to go, or I'm going to have to go, or we'll just keep playing chicken until, we both end up seeing our Lord and Savior.
Yeah.
But
a game of chicken is a good way to put it.
Yeah. So all that to say, I mean, I love the topic of fortitude here, because, you have to decide what you're called to do. Not everybody's called to take this approach. I was very blessed to have my wife, who's the true courageous person. I was like, hey, I don't really want to do this. She actually at one point, like, you coward, like it was.
So that's again, fortitude has to do with fear, meaning something could harm us, because we're talking about your family. This could be income, potential, loss of a father because he's, I don't know, in prison. You don't seem like you're losing sleep about it, so you're able to be present to your family. But what has been, so she shook you, gave you the coward. That's great. I've met her. I'm having trouble picturing that, but I know lots of things happen behind the walls of a house. But that one's hard to picture. So you guys had the discussion, I need to fight this. They're with you. The name Sword&Spade magazine has to do with what we kind of talk about, the primary vocations of a father, which is the sword is to defend.
Yes.
I actually think that's the easier one to talk about. Most people have a hard time with the spade, which is cultivating your local actual reality, building the life worth defending, right? Spading the ground worth defending. How has this experience, I mean, you have a 17-year-old son. Has this made him realize the fight that's in his dad? I mean, is this, what has that done with the relationship with, and I've heard what your wife, that she's the courageous one and shakes you. Like an abused baby.
She holds me accountable.
Holds you accountable. That's what I meant to say. What's it been like for your family processing it as a family? Do you have these discussions? Are they aware of everything going on? Or
the older they are, the more aware they were when it was, in high stress mode. And, my wife was the one cutting down police tape on the playgrounds and staring down, department store managers and grocery clerks and whatever.
She's one of those.
Oh man. Yeah. She was the one. The coward story is about me wanting to mail in my vote for the 2020 election. Uh-huh. And she's like, nope, like that's not going to happen. So I was like, man. So the family, they feed on that, and they see that you're taking a stand for what's important. And you talk about the sword and the spade, both very important things. And at different times, they need to be prioritized based on the threats that are around. And sometimes the spade is more important. Sometimes the sword.
You're in a time of the sword right now.
But I can't put down the spade. I can't stop providing. But above both of those things, those are both functions of us, in the flesh, trying to execute God's will in the material world. Above all of that is spiritual. And so as long as we realize that all the actions that we're required to do with Sword and Spade are aligned with these spiritual ends, then the effects of them, or how we're supposed to be implementing, or what points we're prioritizing them, if we're focused on the spiritual first, those things end up getting in line much easier.
Right.
And so
you're using the word disorder. There will be no order unless God is first.
Yeah. So we prioritized the eternal over the temporal. And in so doing, like I told you earlier, like just such a joy, such peace about this particular thing. If I go to prison, like we put a plan in place. My parents would, take my family. I'd serve whatever time I had. I would, get out and swing hammers, dig ditches.
Yeah.
Like those are details.
Right.
But if you are living your life in a particular way where you're aligned, there's nothing to fear. Yeah. I mean, the eternal is the reward, and so I'm just having fun, honestly. I'm having a blast.
You don't seem like a guy. You guys get out and your kids running around jolly. You don't, look like a man under. I guess you're under the weight of what's the reality of what's happening. And someone facing potential prison. You've obviously thought it through, right? And fortitude helps us endure in the present fear of danger and harm. And prudence, though, looks forward to potential harms in the future. So you're obviously thinking these, like, it's serious. But yeah, you guys are jolly, just wanting to go and see the pigs and the flowers. You had fortitude today. Your daughter had fortitude today, by the way, when we had to move pigs before. I wish I could paint the picture for everybody listening. We have this group of pigs right now. They're terrible. I just don't like these pigs. They're just like, their personality, they get out. They're just like kind of nippy. And we're like scared of them in some way. But your daughter, Zaylee, can I use her name?
Yeah.
All right. Your beautiful daughter, Zaylee, who gave me a hug last night. The pig was running right at her, and I think she like just gave it a little bop, and they're like eye to eye. She's like down the hill. And so anyway, we finally got him in. That was not the smoothest pig move. I'm glad you got to see that. That was whenever people think we have a good orderly farm, I'd like for them to visit and see reality.
Yeah, and for your audience, they might find this humorous too. But I saw Zaylee following you there, and at the time it looked like it was going to go pretty smooth. And so I'm just on the other hill watching, and maybe I have been too long an officer in the Navy. And so, you say, hey, we need to do X, Y, and Z, and you oversee it. You make sure it's done. You've got, subordinate leaders that are helping things to happen. And so, about the time that things are starting to get unruly as you're moving them into the other, and I was like, oh, I better get over there and help, Yeah. So I'm, a day late and a dollar short. Eventually someday when I'm out of the Navy, what you've got going on here is amazing. I told you before, it's a wonderful operation, and your personal family farm and your, economy that you've got going here. It's a dream for any man out there currently wielding sword. Try to get to a point where you can put that down and pick up the spade.
The spade in the ground.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that. It's interesting. Maybe we could actually end with this, just out of the topic. I know that, we live in a time where the tradition and the customs of fatherhood and family have been greatly disrupted, right? We don't know what we're doing. It's like we have these father-son weekends. And if there's for 8 years, we've been having groups of fathers and sons come, and, we're discussing masculinity and fatherhood. And there's just like this universal, maybe it's just people that come here, I don't know, but we're all like, man, how this used to look is lost. And we're now really spading the ground, to rebuild this. But one of the things is that I look at look at them. I read about them, ways of life that people had, and they're within their family. It's just beautiful. And it's just been disrupted, technology and cars and mobility and all this, and just, have made it different. It's just different now. And I know for a lot of men, they find a lot of success, or satisfaction at work. And it could be military, or it could be running a business. And there's a form of leadership that is, exercised in those settings. And then they try to bring it home and it doesn't work. So I don't know. I have lots of friends that have like military families and things like that. But yours is you just have a jolly bunch. So we can maybe blame your wife, but What is, you guys have had to move around and such like that. What's, I don't know, give us some counsel as fathers on, you can't just come home and be a commander, right? And command. I guess there's moments where that works, but for a father, actually, I've found bringing order to the family always looks different than bringing order in leading at work or any other outside thing. The family is a different sort of unit because it's a relationship of love that's never going to change, meaning I'm always going to be a spouse and a father on that. So, just give us little insights on how your leadership in the military might have affected how you're a father, but how you just mentioned how it's not always been chain of command.
Yeah. So, you can err on the side of being, the Captain Von Trapp, right? I mean, you can run that tight ship.
Oh yeah. He's military. I guess that's kind of cliche.
I think, I want to say that the actual man, not the one portrayed in the film, but the actual man, I think he was a submarine captain.
Okay.
And so, but they portray him in the film as being, very rigid, unapproachable. And so, not that I'm the expert, I'm a very flawed, human myself, but, it's a tension. I mean, you've got to make sure, and I think you even alluded this to last night when we were speaking, but, is trying to be the approachable father, trying to be the present husband. I struggle with those things. But for those who still, unfortunately, have to work outside the home, put that work aside when you get back. Focus on the family when you're there. And if you can get to a point, which I really want to get to that point, but if you can get to the point where you're no longer going out into the world to try to provide, but you can incorporate the providing in the course of being present at home, that's the ideal. That's the culture, the society that, if we can drive back to that in some way, I think that's where we can see ultimate success. It might take a few generations, but you're already ahead of me in that fight, and I'm grateful to see it.
Just stick around longer. You'll see the mess we had. No, I will say if somebody were to ask me those kind of questions, I would say, I don't know how to be a good father. I mean, I've written books and stuff, right? But ultimately, I don't know what I'm doing. But when I can work with my kids, that's just where I can be. They can just be about my father's business, and we can just, do things together. It's just it does make it easier. Because you're right. But I work full time. I'm on a computer, right? My joke is, get out of here. I'm writing about being a good dad. Shut up, kid.
Yeah, that's great.
It's still the tension.
Yeah.
But it's not just, I think you said it well. It isn't just dad being home and being present. Like, of course we should do that. But a lot of us don't. So that's a good, basic, but it's also what are we going to do together? And, that's something we enjoy here. But it seems like, do you guys, is this traveling thing? You're kind of on the road here. I guess we just connect. I think I just reached out to you hey, if you're ever passing by, and you said,
we're on our way to spend time with family now. We're going to a family wedding. And we haven't moved a lot. I think one of the things that's helped our kids be well adjusted is I tried to homestead in the military. I tried to stay in one duty location. I did do a couple deployments. I spent time, east of Africa and Persian Gulf and in the Med. I've been all over the world. I missed a kid's birth. So, a lot of things. Family's been through a lot of that stuff. But it's, God gives you strength to get through things in phases, I think. And so we're luckily, God willing, past the, me being on long deployments phase. And hopefully as I approach retirement, we can move into, maybe emulating something you're doing out here into a different phase in our life. But
well, hey, maybe you'll be in prison. Your kids will always know where you are.
That's right.
Just go see dad.
Just go see dad.
He's in the can.
Yeah, the Lord have mercy.
Yes, that's a bad joke. But well, why don't we pray? We've made the sign of the cross now. And thank you, Commander Rob Green, for being here. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
And even though you break the rules, you'll always be a fraternus brother.
Thank you.